Imagine, for a moment, that you are standing in an empty room with two buttons in front of you. If you press the first button, I will give you $5 million, tax-free, right now. If you press the second button, I will give you a single penny, but that penny has a magical property. It will double in value every single day for 31 days. Which do you choose? Most people, driven by the immediate pressure of bills, desires, and the sheer weight of now, grab the 5 million. It feels like wealth. It looks like freedom. But the person who chooses the penny ends the month with over $10 million. This is the fundamental friction of the human experience, the conflict between the loud, demanding present and the quiet, exponential future. In his transformative work, 1 hour a Day to Wealth, the author presents us with a proposition that is both deceptively simple and mathematically inevitable. He argues that wealth is not a lightning strike of luck or the result of a grueling 80-hour work week. Instead, wealth is a byproduct. It is the natural result of a single sacred habit, dedicating 60 minutes of your day to the construction of assets rather than the consumption of products. This book matters today more than ever because we are living through a distraction crisis. We are surrounded by trillion-dollar companies designed to harvest our time and sell it back to us in the form of dopamine. We feel busy, yet we aren't building anything. We are running on a treadmill of linear income, trading our finite life force for a paycheck that vanishes by the end of the month. Throughout this journey, we will explore 4 core themes that serve as our compass: the neurochemistry of focus, the architecture of assets, the math of infinite leverage, and the psychology of the producer. We aren't just talking about money. We are talking about reclaiming the sovereignty of your time. Why do some people seem to get richer while working less, while others work harder only to slip further behind? The answer isn't found in their bank accounts. It's found in how they spent their last 60 minutes. So, I invite you to settle in. We are about to deconstruct the rat race and build, piece by piece, a bridge to a life where your assets work harder than you ever could. Chapter 1. The Alchemy of the Golden Hour. Have you ever stopped to wonder who actually owns your morning? If you wake up to an alarm, check your emails in bed, and rush through a shower to beat the traffic, the answer is simple. Your employer owns your morning. If you spend your first waking hour scrolling through social media, then Silicon Valley owns your morning. Most of us are living in a state of temporal bankruptcy, where our best, most focused energy is sold off to the highest bidder before we've even had a chance to breathe. The core premise of this chapter is a psychological and biological intervention. The author argues that the golden hour, that first 60 minutes of your day, is the most undervalued real estate in the human experience. It is the only time when the world is quiet, your willpower is at its peak, and the internal critic hasn't yet had enough caffeine to start telling you why your dreams are impossible. This isn't just about time management. It is about energy management, the biology of the breakthrough. To understand why this hour is so potent, we have to look at the neurochemistry of the waking brain. When you first wake up, your brain is transitioning from the delta and theta waves of sleep into the alpha state. This is a highly creative, relaxed, and suggestible state of mind. It is the fertile soil of the psyche. If you spend this time consuming news or social media, you are effectively planting weeds in that soil. You are priming your brain for a day of reaction rather than action. By reclaiming this hour for asset building, you are tapping into what psychologists call hyperfocus. In the modern world, focus is the new IQ, while the rest of the world is drowning in a sea of notifications. The person who can sit in a room for 60 minutes and move a single project forward is essentially a superhero. The pay yourself first principle of time in personal finance. There is a classic rule: pay yourself first. It means that before you pay the landlord, the grocer, or the electric company, you put a percentage of your income into savings. The book applies this logic to time. Your time taxes are the hours you owe to your job, your chores, and your social obligations. If you wait until the end of the day to work on your wealth-building habit, you are trying to pay yourself with leftovers. And as anyone who has ever tried to go to the gym at 8 p.m. knows, the leftovers are usually exhausted and uninspired. Think of your daily energy as a battery that drains as the day progresses. Every decision you make, what to wear, what to eat, how to phrase an email leaks a little bit of power. By the time you get home from a long day of linear work, your battery is at 5%. You don't have the cognitive fuel required to build a business, learn a complex skill, or manage an investment portfolio. You only have enough fuel to watch Netflix. By moving that hour to the very front of the day, you ensure that your best self is working on your best life. The story of the two architects. Imagine two architects, Sarah and James. Both have the same talent and the same dream of starting their own firm. James decides he will work on his business plan whenever he has a free moment. He works his 9 to 5, comes home, eats dinner, and sits down at 9 p.m. But his mind is foggy. He spends 40 minutes staring at a blank cursor and 20 minutes researching on YouTube. After 3 years, James is still working the same job, complaining that he just doesn't have the time. Sarah, however, decides to wake up 1 hour earlier. At 6 a.m., the house is silent. For 60 minutes, she does nothing but design. She doesn't check her phone. She doesn't look at the news. She simply builds. In that 1 hour, because her mind is fresh and the distractions are zero, she produces more than James does in an entire week of late-night grinding. Within 18 months, Sarah has a portfolio of designs that allows her to quit her job. The difference wasn't talent. It was the alchemy of the hour. Sarah understood that 60 minutes of deep work is worth 5 hours of shallow work. The philosophical weight of the minute. There is a deeper, almost spiritual level to this habit. When you dedicate the first hour of your day to your own growth, you are sending a powerful signal to your subconscious. I am worth it. Most people live as servants to their schedule. They are constantly reacting to the demands of others. This creates a subtle, underlying sense of resentment and powerlessness. But when you start your day by building something that belongs to you, you enter your 9-to-5 job as a sovereign. You aren't just an employee. You are an investor who happens to be consulting for a company for 8 hours a day. This shift in identity is the true beginning of wealth. We often overestimate what we can do in a day, but we drastically underestimate what we can do in a year of consistent 1-hour blocks. This is the power of the minimum effective dose. You don't need to quit your job or move to a cabin in the woods to become wealthy. You just need to win the first 60 minutes. Facing the resistance. Of course, this isn't easy. The resistance, as author Stephen Pressfield calls it, will fight you. Your bed will feel warmer at 6 a.m. than it does at 10 p.m. Your brain will tell you that you need the extra sleep. But this is where the wealth mindset begins. It begins with the realization that the comfort of that extra hour of sleep is actually a very expensive luxury. It is costing you your future freedom. Ask yourself, if someone offered to pay you $1,000 to wake up an hour early tomorrow, would you do it? Most would say yes. Well, the 1-hour habit is worth far more than $1,000. It's the seed of an asset that can pay you for the rest of your life. But once you've reclaimed this hour, what exactly should you be doing with it? If you spend your hours simply working harder at your current job, you've missed the point entirely. To truly build wealth, you must understand the difference between an income and an asset. The first hour of your day is your wealth-building capital. If you spend it on others, you remain a debtor. But if you invest it in yourself, you become the bank. Chapter 2. The Asset Mindset versus the Income Trap. If you were to walk down a busy city street and ask 100 people, what is wealth? 99 of them would give you an answer involving a number. They'd talk about a 6-figure salary, $1 million in the bank, or perhaps a garage full of Italian supercars. We are conditioned to view wealth as a flow of currency or a pile of possessions. But this is the great deception of the modern economy. The core idea of this chapter is to dismantle the income trap, the belief that a high salary is the same thing as being rich. In reality, a surgeon earning $500,000 a year can be functionally poor if their lifestyle requires $500,000 to maintain, while a librarian with a modest portfolio of dividend stocks and a small side business is truly wealthy. The difference lies in the source of the seed. Are you the laborer tilling someone else's field for a bag of grain, or are you the owner of the orchard, the treadmill of linear income? Most of us are trained from birth to seek linear income. This is the most basic form of economic exchange. Work equals money. You show up for 8 hours, You get paid for 8 hours. If you don't show up, the money stops. This is a fragile existence, regardless of how much you are paid per hour. The problem with linear income is that it is fundamentally unscalable. You only have 24 hours in a day, and you have to sleep for some of them. Even if you are a world-class consultant charging $1,000 an hour, you are still a prisoner of the clock. If you get sick, if you want to travel, or if you simply burn out, your income vanishes. This is the income trap. It creates a golden handcuff effect, where the more you earn, the more you spend, and the harder it becomes to ever stop working. What exactly is an asset? The author defines an asset with brutal simplicity. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket while you sleep. If you have to be physically or mentally present for the money to arrive, it isn't an asset, it's a job. When we talk about spending 1 hour a day to build wealth, we are talking about building wealth machines. Think of your daily hour as a construction shift. You are not working in the traditional sense. You are an engineer building a robot. Once the robot is finished, it will work for you forever. There are 3 primary characteristics of a true wealth asset. Decoupling, the income it generates is not tied to your time. Scalability, it can serve 10 people or 10,000 people with roughly the same amount of effort. Durability, it retains value and continues to produce over long periods. The parable of the pipeline. To illustrate this, let's look at a classic story often cited in financial circles, the parable of the pipeline. 2 men, Bruno and Pablo, were hired to bring water from a nearby mountain spring to a village square. Bruno was thrilled. He grabbed 2 large buckets and began trekking back and forth. For every bucket he delivered, he got a coin. He was making great money. He bought a bigger house and a fancy donkey. He was the star of the village. Pablo, however, had a different plan. He spent part of his day carrying buckets to earn enough to survive, but he spent the rest of his time, his 1 hour, digging a trench. The villagers laughed at him. "Why are you digging in the dirt when you could be carrying buckets like Bruno?" they mocked. For a long time, Pablo had nothing to show for it. His income was lower than Bruno's because he was spending his energy on the trench. But one day, the pipeline reached the village. Suddenly, water flowed 24/7. Pablo didn't have to carry a single bucket ever again. While Bruno grew old and his back gave out, rendering him penniless, Pablo became the wealthiest man in the region. The pipeline is the asset. The buckets are the job. Most people spend their entire lives looking for bigger buckets. The wealthy spend their 1 hour building the pipeline. The psychology of phantom wealth. Why do we fall for the income trap? It's largely due to a psychological phenomenon known as lifestyle creep. When we get a raise, we don't buy time, we buy status symbols. We buy a nicer car or a bigger house, which increases our monthly overhead. This creates a psychological treadmill where we feel like we are moving fast but staying in the same place. We become asset poor. We have the appearance of wealth, the car, the clothes, but no underlying machinery to support it. This leads to a constant, low-level anxiety. We know that if the bucket carrying stops, everything collapses. The 1 hour habit is the antidote to this anxiety. It provides a sense of economic sovereignty. When you know that you are building something that exists independently of your employer's whim, your entire posture toward life changes. You become less fearful of a layoff and more confident in your negotiations. You are no longer a supplicant begging for a paycheck. You are a producer building an empire. The 3 realms of asset building. During your 60 minutes, you should be focusing on one of 3 realms. These aren't just investments in the sense of buying a stock. They are built assets. Intellectual assets, writing a book, creating a course, or developing a proprietary system. These cost almost nothing to build, but have infinite leverage because they can be duplicated at 0 cost. Systems assets, automating a business process or building a software tool that solves a recurring problem. Equity assets. This is the traditional path researching and buying pieces of other people's pipelines, stocks, real estate, or private businesses. The shift from consumer to producer. The hardest part of this chapter isn't the math, it's the identity shift. We live in a world designed to make us consumers. We are told that self-care is buying things or watching things, but true self-care is creating things. When you sit down for your hour, you must leave the consumer mind at the door. You aren't there to check things or see what's happening. You are there to produce. Even if you are just researching an investment, you are producing a thesis. You are building a body of knowledge. This shift in mindset, from what can the world give me, to what can I build that the world finds valuable, is the threshold of true wealth. Reflecting on the hidden cost, every time you spend money, you aren't just spending currency. You are spending the assets that money could have bought. If you spend $50,000 on a luxury car, you aren't just out $50,000. You are out the $5,000 a year in dividend income that money could have generated for the rest of your life. When you view the world through the asset mindset, you realize that the most expensive thing you can buy is stuff that depreciates. The cheapest thing you can buy is time in the form of assets. This doesn't mean you have to live like a monk. It means you prioritize the engine before the paint job. Understanding the difference between an income and an asset is the what of the journey. But to actually make that asset grow, we need to understand the how. And the how is found in a mathematical force so powerful that Albert Einstein supposedly called it the eighth wonder of the world. It is a force that rewards the patient and punishes the impulsive. Key takeaway: stop looking for a bigger bucket and start digging your pipeline. Wealth is measured not by how much you earn, but by how much you own that earns for you. Chapter 3. Compounding beyond the stock market. If you want to understand the true nature of wealth, you have to stop thinking about addition and start thinking about multiplication. Most people live their lives in a world of plus signs. They think, if I work an extra hour, I get $50. If I save $10 today and $10 tomorrow, I have $20. This is linear thinking. It is comfortable, it is intuitive, and it is the reason most people never achieve true financial freedom. The core idea of this chapter is to introduce you to the most powerful force in the known universe: exponential growth. Usually, we hear this term in the context of a retirement account or a high-interest savings plan. But the author's genius lies in expanding this definition. Compounding is not just a financial tool. It is a universal law of nature that applies to your skills, your network, your reputation, and your digital footprint. When you dedicate 1 hour a day to building assets, you aren't just adding bricks to a wall. You are planting seeds that grow into trees, which drop seeds that grow into forests. The physics of the snowball effect. Imagine a tiny snowball at the top of a massive, snow-covered mountain. You give it a little nudge. For the first few feet, it looks pathetic. It's barely picking up any snow. If you were watching it, you might think, this is a waste of time. I could have just carried a handful of snow down the mountain much faster. This is what the first 6 months of the 1 hour habit feels like. You are putting in the work, but the results are invisible. But then, something happens. As the snowball rolls, its surface area increases. Because its surface area is larger, it picks up more snow with every single rotation. By the time it reaches the middle of the mountain, it's a boulder. By the time it reaches the bottom, it's an unstoppable avalanche. The 1 hour habit is the nudge at the top of the mountain. In the beginning, you are building the surface area. You are learning the basics of a skill, setting up the infrastructure of a business, or researching the fundamentals of a market. You feel like you're getting nowhere, but the math is working beneath the surface. You are building the foundation for the avalanche phase of your life. The great misunderstanding of time. Why do most people quit? Because humans are biologically hardwired for linear expectations. We expect that if we put in 10% more effort, we should see 10% more results. But compounding doesn't work that way. Compounding is back. If you take that doubling penny example from our introduction, on day 20, you only have about $5,200. Most people would look at 20 days of hard work and say, I only have $5,000. This is a scam. I could have made more working overtime at the factory. They quit on day 21, unaware that they were only 10 days away from $5 million in your 1 hour journey. There is a period the author calls the valley of disappointment. This is the gap between your linear expectations and the actual exponential reality. Wealth is built by those who can tolerate the silence of the first 20 days. Knowledge, compounding, the high-yield skill, the most ignored asset you can build in your daily hour is intellectual capital. Most people think that once they finish school, their learning is over. They might read a business book once a year, but they aren't compounding knowledge. When you spend an hour a day deeply studying a high-value field, let's say, digital marketing, systems architecture, or real estate law, aren't just learning facts, you are building a mental lattice. Year 1, you learn the vocabulary. You understand the what. Year 2, you start to see patterns. You understand the how. Year 3, you begin to synthesize ideas. You understand the why. By year 4, your knowledge in that specific niche starts to compound. You can solve a problem in 5 minutes that takes a beginner 5 weeks. Your value per hour doesn't just double. It goes up by 10x or 100x. This is why Warren Buffett spends 80% of his day reading. He isn't looking for a hot tip. He is building a massive library of mental models that allow him to make multi-billion-dollar decisions in seconds. He is the ultimate practitioner of knowledge compounding. The networking compound, who you are building for. We often hear it's not what you know, it's who you know. But the 1-hour habit reframes this. It's who knows what you know. If you use your hour to produce something, a blog post, a video, a piece of code, or a thoughtful analysis of a market trend, you share it. You are building a digital asset. This asset works for you while you sleep. It introduces you to people you've never met. It creates surface area for luck. One person sees your work and shares it with 1,000. One of those 1,000 is a potential partner, an investor, or a mentor. This is network compounding. Unlike a traditional job where you meet the same 5 people at the water cooler every day, building assets in public allows you to compound your reputation globally. Your 1 hour creates a digital twin of yourself that is out there networking 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The cost of delay, the waiting tax. To truly appreciate compounding, you have to understand the penalty for waiting. Let's look at 2 investors, Maya and Leo. Maya starts her 1-hour habit at age 20. She builds a small asset that generates $500 a month and reinvests it. She stops contributing entirely at age 30 and just lets it sit. Leo waits until he is 30 to start. He realizes he's behind, so he works twice as hard, investing $1,000 a month for the next 30 years until he's 60. Even though Leo invested significantly more money and worked for 3 times as long, Maya will likely end up with more wealth. Why? Because she gave the snowball more time to roll. The most expensive thing you can ever pay is the waiting tax. Every year you spend thinking about starting your hour is a year of doubling you will never get back at the end of your life. Reflecting on the boring middle, the philosophy of compounding teaches us that wealth is actually quite boring for a long time. It's the same hour, the same ritual, the same lack of immediate applause. We live in a culture of the big break, the lottery win, the viral video, the crypto moonshot, but these are outliers. True, sustainable wealth is built in the boring middle. It's about the persistence of vision. Can you keep digging the pipeline when there is no water? Can you keep writing the code when there are no users? The math says that if you do, the tipping point is inevitable. It's not a matter of if, but when. This realization takes the anxiety out of the process. You don't have to be a genius. You just have to be a constant. The skill of skill stacking. Another way compounding works is through skill stacking. Instead of trying to be the top 1% in the world at one thing, which is nearly impossible, you spend your 1 hour becoming the top 10% at 3 related things. If you are a decent writer, you are a commodity. If you are a decent writer who also understands data science, you are a rarity. If you are a decent writer who understands data science and knows how to build a sales funnel, you are a one-of-a-kind asset. Your wealth doesn't add up with each new skill. It multiplies. Your daily hour is the laboratory where you engineer this unique stack. But what exactly should you be stacking? How do you know if the snowball you are pushing is made of snow or just cold mud? To build wealth that lasts forever, you need to know where to point your energy. You need to understand the 4 pillars that hold up the house of freedom. Key takeaway: you don't need to be 100% better than your competition to get 100% better results. You just need to be 1% better every day, and let the clock do the heavy lifting. Chapter 4. The 4 Pillars of Wealth Assets. If we've agreed that your 1 hour is a construction shift, the natural question becomes, what are we building? You wouldn't walk onto a construction site and just start moving bricks around at random. You need a blueprint. You need to know which structures are designed to weather the storm and which are merely decorative. In this chapter, we move from the philosophy of time to the architecture of ownership. The author identifies 4 distinct pillars of assets. Each one has a different physics. Some require more maintenance, some offer higher leverage, and some provide more stability. To build a resilient financial life, you don't necessarily need all 4, but you must master at least one. Your 1 hour is the time you spend either acquiring, building, or optimizing these pillars. Pillar 1. Paper assets, the engine of the markets. Paper assets, stocks, bonds, dividends, and index funds are the most accessible form of asset building. For many, the 1 hour in this category isn't spent working in the traditional sense, but rather in analysis and systematization. The beauty of paper assets is that they represent equity in human ingenuity. When you buy a share of a global index fund, you are essentially hiring the smartest CEOs and hardest working employees in the world to work for you. You are buying a tiny slice of their 1 hour. During your daily 60 minutes, your task here is to move from a gambler to an owner. A gambler checks the price of their stocks every 10 minutes. An owner spends an hour a week reviewing the fundamentals of their portfolio and automating their contributions. The goal is to create a frictionless wealth machine. You are building a system where, every time you get paid, a portion of that money is automatically diverted into these paper assets. Over time, the dividends produced by these assets will eventually exceed your living expenses. That is the moment of crossover, where you are officially free. Pillar 2. Digital assets, the infinite leverage. This is perhaps the most exciting pillar for the modern age. We are living through a digital renaissance where the cost of production has dropped to near zero. But the potential for scale is infinite. A digital asset is anything made of bits rather than atoms. It's a YouTube video, an ebook, a piece of software, a newsletter, or an online course. Why is this a pillar of wealth? Because of zero marginal cost. If a carpenter builds a chair, a physical asset, he has to buy more wood and spend more hours to sell a second chair. But if you spend your 1 hour writing a guide on how to build chairs, you can sell that guide to 1 person or 1 million people with no additional work. In the digital realm, your 1 hour is spent creating soldiers. Every blog post you write or video you produce is a soldier you send out into the internet to fight for your attention and your income. They don't sleep, they don't ask for raises, and they work for you 24/7. This is permissionless leverage. You don't need a bank to approve your loan or a boss to give you a promotion. You just need a laptop and the discipline to show up for 60 minutes. Pillar 3. Business systems, the machine of value. Many people think of owning a business as a job that requires 80 hours a week. That's because they own a service, not a system. The author makes a sharp distinction here. If you are the one doing the work, you have a job. If you have built a system that does the work, you have an asset. In your 1 hour, you are not working in the business. You are working on the business. This might mean writing standard operating procedures, SOPs, so someone else can handle your customer service. Setting up automated marketing funnels that find customers while you sleep. Researching outsourcing or software that can handle repetitive tasks. The goal of this pillar is autonomy. You are building a wealth machine that can function without your physical presence. Think of it like a clockmaker. You spend your hour meticulously placing the gears and winding the spring. Once it's set in motion, the clock tells the time whether the clockmaker is in the room or not. Pillar 4. Human capital, the ultimate asset. This is the most foundational pillar. It is the asset that sits between your ears. Your human capital is your collection of skills, your health, your reputation, and your ability to solve problems. The author argues that if you lost all your money, your digital assets, and your business tomorrow, your human capital is what would allow you to rebuild it all in record time. During your 1 hour, investing in this pillar looks like skill acquisition, learning a high-income skill like copywriting, data analysis, or public speaking. Mental modeling, learning how to think, how to avoid biases, and how to make better decisions. Health and vitality, because you cannot build wealth if you are too sick to enjoy it or too tired to focus. The return on investment, ROI, for human capital is often the highest of all pillars. A $20 book that teaches you a skill you use for the next 30 years has an ROI that would make a Wall Street hedge fund manager weep with envy. The strategy: selecting your vehicle. The trap most people fall into is shiny object syndrome. They spend 20 minutes on stocks, 10 minutes thinking about a YouTube channel, and 30 minutes reading about a new business idea. They have 4 half-finished pillars, none of which can support the weight of a feather. The 1-hour rule demands focus. You must pick one pillar to be your primary wealth vehicle for a season, usually 6 to 12 months. If you have more money than time, focus on paper assets. If you have more time than money, focus on digital assets. If you have a unique insight into a problem, focus on business systems. Regardless of what you choose, 10% of your time should always be dedicated to human capital. The story of the quiet millionaire. Consider the story of Ronald Read. He was a gas station attendant and a janitor. He didn't have a high-income job, and he didn't invent a new technology. But he had a 1-hour habit only. His was an 1-hour of research habit. He spent his spare time studying the stock market and investing in blue-chip paper asset. When he died at age 92, he had an estate worth over $8 million. He didn't win the lottery. He simply understood the pillar of paper assets and let the compounding snowball roll for decades. He lived a life of quiet dignity because he owned his 1 hour. He was a producer of capital in the body of a laborer. The philosophy of the stack. As you progress, these pillars begin to lean on one another. This is where wealth becomes forever wealth. Your human capital skills allows you to create digital assets content. That content generates cash flow, which you then invest into paper assets, stocks. Those stocks provide a safety net that allows you to take bigger risks in building business systems. This is the flywheel effect. In the beginning, you are pushing the wheel with all your might, just to get it to budge. But eventually, the momentum of the different pillars working together takes over. The wheel starts spinning so fast that it generates its own energy. At this stage, you aren't trying to be wealthy anymore. You simply are wealthy, and it would take a monumental effort to stop the momentum. The warning, the consumer's illusion. The biggest threat to your pillars isn't the stock market crashing or a business failing. It is the illusion of consumption. We are surrounded by fake assets. A car is not an asset. It's a liability that bleeds money. A big house that you live in is not an asset in the cash flow sense. It's a forced savings plan at best and a money pit at worst. When you sit down for your 60 minutes, you must be ruthlessly honest with yourself. Am I building a pillar today, or am I just decorating a tomb? Watching a video about wealth is not building a pillar. Reading a book about wealth is only building a pillar if you apply the knowledge to your human capital. True building requires output. It requires making a trade, writing a page, or making a call. It requires the courage to be a beginner and the humility to realize that your first pillar will probably look a little shaky. But a shaky pillar is still better than no pillar at all. Knowing what to build is the blueprint. But even with the best blueprint, most people fail because they hit a wall. That wall isn't external, it's the internal resistance of our own biology. To keep your 1-hour appointment every day for a decade, you need more than just a good idea. You need to understand the mechanics of the habit itself. You need to know how to make the hard path feel like the natural one. Key takeaway: wealth is a structure supported by 4 pillars: paper, digital, systems, and self. Your job is not to work for money, but to spend your time building the pillars that will eventually carry you. Chapter 5. The Frictionless Habit, Overcoming Internal Resistance. We have the blueprint. We understand the math of compounding, and we know which pillars we want to build. But there is a ghost in the machine. Every morning, when the alarm goes off at 6 a.m., a voice inside your head, the same voice that was so inspired just 12 hours ago, suddenly becomes a world-class defense attorney for your comfort. It argues for the warmth of the blankets. It reminds you that you had a long day yesterday. It whispers that one day won't matter. This is the resistance. In this chapter, we move into the psychology of the habit itself. The author argues that wealth is not a financial problem. It is a behavioral consistency problem. If you can solve the human element, the friction between your intentions and your actions, wealth becomes a mathematical certainty. To do this, we have to stop relying on willpower and start relying on design. The myth of willpower. Most people fail because they treat willpower like an infinite well. They think, I'll just try harder tomorrow. But willpower is actually a physiological resource, much like a muscle. It gets tired. Every time you resist a cookie, force yourself to focus on a boring spreadsheet, or navigate a stressful conversation, you are draining your willpower battery. By the time you reach the point in your day where you need to build your assets, your battery is often in the red zone. This is why the author insists on the first hour. But even in the morning, the friction is there. To overcome it, we must move from willpower to architecture. We need to design a life where the 1 hour is the path of least resistance. The physics of friction, reducing the starting cost. In physics, there is a concept called static friction. It takes significantly more energy to get a heavy object moving than it does to keep it moving once it's in motion. The same is true for your daily hour. The hardest part isn't the 60 minutes of work. It's the first 60 seconds of getting to the desk. To beat this, you must engineer out the friction. This is often called environmental design. If your 1 hour is for writing, your laptop should be open, the document ready, and your phone in another room before you even go to sleep. If your hour is for stock research, your spreadsheets should be the first thing that appears when you wake your computer. If you want to exercise your human capital through reading, the book should be sitting on your pillow. You want to reduce the number of steps between your pillow and your asset building. Every step is an opportunity for the resistance to talk you out of it. If you have to spend 10 minutes looking for your notes or clearing off your desk, you've already lost. You want to make it so easy to start that it would actually be more work to avoid it. The 2-minute rule and the identity shift. One of the most powerful tools in behavioral science is the 2-minute rule. Popularized by James Clear, but central to the author's philosophy of consistency. When you feel the crushing weight of building a business or writing a book, the goal feels too big. It creates cognitive friction. Instead, tell yourself, I am only going to do 2 minutes. Anyone can sit down for 120 seconds. But here is the secret. Once you start, the static friction is broken. You are now in motion. Usually, those 2 minutes turn into 20 or 60. But even if they don't, even if you truly only do 2 minutes, you have achieved something far more important than productivity. You have cast a vote for your new identity. Wealth is not built by doing big things. It is built by becoming the type of person who never misses their hour. When you show up, even on the days you feel like garbage, you are reinforcing the belief, I am a producer. I am someone who builds assets. Once that identity takes root, the habit becomes effortless because you are simply acting in alignment with who you are. The valley of disappointment, surviving the lag. We must address the psychological black hole of asset building, the lag. In the beginning, your efforts and your results are disconnected. You spend 30 hours, 1 month of your 1 hour learning about real estate, and your bank account hasn't moved a cent. In fact, it might have gone down because you bought a book. This is the valley of disappointment. The human brain is an ancient organ designed for immediate feedback. If our ancestors picked a berry, they got a sugar hit immediately. They weren't wired to plant a seed and wait 5 years for a harvest. To survive this, you have to shift your dopamine source. Instead of getting a rush from the result, the money, you must learn to get a rush from the ritual, the hour. You have to gamify the process. Put a giant X on a calendar for every day you complete your hour. Your goal is not to become a millionaire today. Your goal is to not break the chain. The strategy of time boxing. The author discusses a technique called time boxing. This is different from a to-do list. A to-do list is a wish list of tasks that often leads to anxiety. A time box is a contract with yourself. During your 1 hour, you are in a silo of silence. You are not allowed to Check your email, unless it is the specific task. Research on social media. Clean your desk. Think about what you should do. If you don't know what to do during your hour, your task for that hour is to plan the next 10 hours. But you do not leave the silo by creating a hard border around this time. You protect it from the vampires of distraction. You are training your brain to enter a flow state on command. This is a skill that compounds just like money. The more often you enter deep focus, the easier it becomes to stay there. The social friction, dealing with the crabs. Perhaps the most difficult friction is not internal, but external. When you start waking up early or saying no to late-night drinks because you have your 1-hour appointment, the people around you will notice. Some will be inspired. Others, however, will subconsciously try to pull you back down. This is the crab in a bucket mentality. If one crab tries to climb out, the others will grab its legs and pull it back. They aren't doing this because they are evil. They are doing it because your progress acts as a mirror to their own stagnation. To overcome this, you must treat your 1 hour as a non-negotiable medical appointment. You wouldn't skip a surgery because a friend wanted to grab a beer. You are performing surgery on your future. You don't need to be aggressive about it. You just need to be quietly stubborn. You don't need to announce your dreams to everyone. In fact, the author suggests keeping them private. Let your results do the talking. The cost of admission philosophy. Every great achievement has a cost of admission. For the elite athlete, it's the pain of the training. For the master musician, it's the boredom of the scales. For the wealthy person, it's the friction of the morning. The author reframes this friction as a good thing. Why? Because if it were easy, everyone would do it. If everyone did it, the return on that hour would be diluted. The very fact that it is hard to wake up, hard to focus, and hard to stay consistent is the moat that protects your future wealth. The friction is the filter that separates the dreamers from the owners. Every time you push through the resistance, you are paying the tax that buys you a life of freedom. Reflecting on the perfect versus the done. A common form of friction is perfectionism. We tell ourselves, I can't start my hour today because I don't have the perfect strategy yet. This is just a resistance, wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. It's procrastination, disguised as due diligence. The author's advice is simple. Start messy. An hour of bad writing, mediocre research, or clumsy coding is infinitely more valuable than an hour of perfect thinking. You can't steer a parked car. You have to get the 1-hour habit moving before you can optimize it. Your first assets will likely be failures. Your first investments might be suboptimal, but the habit is the true asset. Once the habit is frictionless, the quality will follow. Once you have mastered the internal battle and made the habit automatic, you begin to see the world differently. You stop seeing yourself as a cog in someone else's machine. You start to realize that you are a creator in a world that is hungry for value. This leads us to the most profound identity shift of all, the move from being a consumer of life to being a producer of it. Key takeaway: you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Design your environment to make the 1 hour inevitable, and the resistance will eventually fall silent. Chapter 6. The Producer's Creed: The Psychology of Creation. In the modern world, there is a silent war being fought every single day. It is a war for your attention, and the battleground is your mind. On one side are the consumers, the billions of people who spend their lives reacting to what others have built. They wake up and check social media, consuming someone else's highlight reel. They go to work and fulfill tasks, consuming someone else's vision. They come home and watch streaming services, consuming someone else's stories. On the other side are the producers. These are the few who understand that the only way to true wealth and true fulfillment is to be the one who creates the value that everyone else consumes. The core idea of this chapter is the producer's creed. It is a fundamental shift in identity. The author argues that you cannot build a life of freedom while maintaining the mindset of a consumer. Consumption is a drain. Production is a well. When you commit to your 1 hour, you are declaring your independence from the consumer class. You are crossing the invisible line from the person who pays for the party to the person who owns the venue. The dopamine trap: consumption as a drug. To understand the producer's mindset, We must first understand the biology of the consumer. We are living in a dopamine economy. Every app on your phone, every headline in your feed, and every product in the store is engineered to trigger a tiny hit of dopamine in your brain. This neurotransmitter is not the molecule of pleasure. It is the molecule of more. It keeps you looking, scrolling, and buying, but it never leaves you satisfied. The consumer is trapped in a loop of passive absorption. Because consumption is easy, it requires zero effort, and provides an immediate hit height, it becomes the default state. However, consumption has a half-life. The joy of a new purchase, or the entertainment of a viral video, fades almost instantly, leaving you hungry for the next hit. This is the psychological route of the rat race. You work for money, to buy things, to get dopamine, to forget that you have to go back to work. The producer's high, the serotonin of craft. Production, on the other hand, operates on a different neurochemical frequency. When you sit down for your 1 hour to build an asset, it is often difficult. It might even be frustrating. There is no immediate dopamine hit. But as you push through the difficulty and actually create something, a paragraph, a line of code, a financial strategy, you experience a deeper, more sustainable form of satisfaction. This is the producer's high. It is the feeling of competence and agency. While the consumer feels like a leaf blown by the wind of the economy, the producer feels like the wind itself. When you produce, you are exerting your will upon the world. This creates a sense of internal locus of control, the belief that you are the primary architect of your fate. This psychological shift is actually more valuable than the money the asset eventually makes. It is the foundation of unshakable self-confidence. The power of ownership. First thinking. The producer views every interaction through the lens of ownership. When a consumer sees a popular new app, they think, how can I use this to entertain myself? When a producer sees that same app, they think, how was this built? What problem does it solve? How are they monetizing it? And how can I build something that captures this type of value? In your 1 hour, you are training your brain to deconstruct the world. You start to see the matrix of the economy. You realize that everything around you, from the chair you're sitting into the software you're using, started as someone's 1 hour of focused production. The author suggests a radical exercise. For every hour you spend consuming, watching TV, scrolling, you must spend 1 hour producing. Most people find this impossible. They realize they are content debtors. They take far more from the world's creative pool than they contribute. The goal of the 1 hour habit is to flip that ratio. You want to become a net producer. The concept of infinite games. The consumer mindset is a finite game. You have a certain amount of money, you spend it, and it's gone. You have a certain amount of time, you kill it, and it's gone. It is a game of depletion. The producer mindset is an infinite game. When you build an asset, that asset creates value. That value generates income. That income allows you to buy back more of your time. That time allows you to build more assets. It is a self-reinforcing loop of growth. Consider the difference between a person who buys a $1,000 iPhone and a person who buys $1,000 worth of Apple stock. The consumer has a device that starts losing value the moment they open the box. They are paying for the privilege of being a customer. The producer, as an owner of the stock, is getting paid the privilege of having other people buy iPhones. Your 1 hour is the time you spend moving your resources from the finite column to the infinite column. Building the creator's portfolio. The producer knows that not every seed will grow, but they plant anyway. During your daily hour, you are building a portfolio of experiments. The failure. You spend a month building an ebook that nobody buys. The consumer would see this as a waste of time. The producer sees it as tuition. They learn the skill of writing, formatting, and marketing. The success. You spend a month building a small software tool that automates a niche business task. It starts making $200 a month. This is a win, but more importantly, it's a proof of concept. The producer doesn't need a 100% success rate, because assets compound and linear work does not. One Grand Slam asset can pay for a lifetime of strikeouts. The consumer is terrified of failing because they view their time as a limited resource to be protected. The producer views their time as risk capital to be deployed. The story of the unseen empire. The author tells the story of a man named David who worked a standard corporate job. David was a consumer by day, but for 1 hour every evening, he was a producer. He loved woodworking. Instead of just making furniture for his house, he started documenting his process. He wrote detailed how-to guides and filmed short clips of his techniques. For 2 years, David didn't make a dime. His friends were out at happy hours while he was in his garage, covered in sawdust, wasting his time. But David was building a digital asset library. Eventually, a major DIY website found his guides and offered to buy his entire catalog and hire him as a consultant. David's 1 hour had created an empire that existed entirely separate from his 9-to-5. He didn't just have money, he had authority. He was no longer a guy who works in an office. He was the authority on woodworking. This is the ultimate gift of the producer's creed. It gives you a second identity that the world cannot take away from you. Overcoming the imposter syndrome. The biggest hurdle to becoming a producer is the feeling that you have nothing to contribute. Who am I to write a book? Who am I to start a business? Who am I to give advice? The author's response is liberating. The world doesn't need more experts. It needs more documentarians. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You just have to be the person who shows up for an hour and shares what they are learning, building, or observing. Production is not about perfection. It is about contribution. Every time you choose to produce instead of consume, you are curing your imposter syndrome. You can't feel like a fake when you have a tangible asset sitting in front of you that you've built with your own hands. The work itself is the evidence of your value. The ethics of production. There is also an ethical dimension to this chapter. The author argues that consuming without producing is a form of economic parasitism. We all stand on the shoulders of the producers who came before Usta, people who built the roads, the internet, the medicine, and the music we enjoy. By dedicating an hour a day to production, you are paying your rent for being a member of a civilized society. You are adding a tiny bit of value back into the system. Whether it's a better way to organize a spreadsheet, a beautiful piece of art, or a well-researched investment that helps a company grow, you are participating in a great build. This gives your life a sense of purpose that shopping and watching can never provide. When you embrace the producer's creed, you realize that the digital world is not just a place to hang out. It's a massive, open-source construction site. We are living in a time where the tools of production are in everyone's hands. Yet most people are using their $1,000 smartphones as $1,000 television sets. In the next chapter, we'll look at how to leverage this specific moment in history to scale your 1 hour into a global asset. Key takeaway: you are either a customer or an owner. Every hour you spend producing is a step toward freedom, and every hour you spend consuming is a step toward the treadmill. Chapter 7: Leveraging the Digital Renaissance. We are currently living through the most significant shift in human history since the invention of the printing press. For thousands of years, wealth was tied to atoms, land, gold, oil, and physical labor. If you wanted to build an asset, you needed a massive amount of capital, a literal army of workers, or a royal bloodline. But the world has changed. We have moved from the age of atoms to the age of bits. The core idea of this chapter is permissionless leverage. The author argues that the 1 hour habit is more powerful today than it would have been 30 years ago because of the digital renaissance. Today, a teenager in a bedroom with a laptop has more leverage than a CEO of a Fortune 500 company did in 1970. To build wealth now, you don't need to ask for permission. You just need to understand the mechanics of the digital world. The end of the gatekeepers. In the old economy, there were gatekeepers everywhere. If you wanted to build a paper asset investing, you had to call a broker who charged massive fees and required a high minimum balance. If you wanted to build a digital asset content, you had to be discovered by a publishing house, a record label, or a television network. If you wanted to build a business system, you needed a physical storefront, inventory, and a local bank loan. The digital renaissance has dynamited these gates. During your 1 hour, you are interacting with a global, open-source infrastructure. You can buy a fractional share of a company for $1 on an app. You can publish a book on Amazon in 10 minutes. You can launch a global store on Shopify for the price of a pizza. The only thing standing between you and an asset is your own discipline of focus. The author notes that the lack of a boss is no longer the problem. The lack of a self-starter is the problem. The concept of infinite leverage. To understand why the 1 hour scales so rapidly today, we have to look at the 3 types of leverage. Labor, old world, getting people to work for you. This is hard to manage and expensive. Capital, old world, getting money to work for you. This is effective, but requires you to have money first. Code and media, new world. This is permissionless leverage. Code and media are the leverage of the newly rich. They are the leverage of the marginal cost of one. When you spend your hour creating a video, a podcast, or a software script, you are creating a product that can be replicated 1 billion times for $0. Think about the physics of wealth here. If you are a plumber, you have 0 leverage. You must be there to fix the pipe. If you own a plumbing company, you have labor leverage. But if you spend your 1 hour creating a digital course that teaches 10,000 people how to fix their own pipes, you have infinite leverage. You have decoupled your income from your time using the tools of the digital renaissance. The global village economy. In the past, your 1 hour was limited by your geography. If you lived in a small town, you could only sell your skills or products to the people in that town. Today, your 1 hour is plugged into a global network of 4 billion people. The author introduces the concept of niche compounding because the market is now the entire world. You can be the best in the world at something incredibly specific. You don't need to appeal to everyone. You only need to appeal to a tiny fraction of the global population. If you build an asset that solves a problem for 0.001% of the world, you have 80,000 customers. That is a multi-million-dollar business built in 60-minute increments. This is the beauty of the long tail of the internet. The rise of the personal monopoly. One of the most profound assets you can build in a digital renaissance is what the author calls a personal monopoly. This is the intersection of your unique skills, your unique personality, and your unique interests. During your hour, you shouldn't just be learning a skill. You should be combining skills. A person who knows Python is a programmer, a commodity. A person who knows Python and loves 18th century French history is a personal monopoly. When you use your digital hour to create content or tools at this intersection, you have no competition. Competition is for people who are doing the same thing as everyone else. By leveraging your 1 hour to build a unique digital footprint, you become the only instead of the best. This makes your wealth unassailable because nobody can out-do you. The architecture of the digital twin. The author suggests that your 1 hour should be spent building your digital twin. This is a version of you that lives on the internet. While you are sleeping, eating, or working your day job, your digital twin is answering questions through your blog, videos, selling products through your automated store, building trust through your newsletter, networking through your social presence. If you don't have a digital twin, you are limited to what your physical body can achieve in 24 hours. If you do have a digital twin, you are essentially a multiverse producer. You are operating in thousands of places at once. This is how 1 hour turns into 10,000 hours of impact. The digital renaissance has given us the ability to clone our productivity. The danger, the digital casino. However, the digital renaissance is a double-edged sword. The same tools that allow for infinite leverage also allow for infinite distraction. The author warns against the digital casino, the parts of the internet designed to keep you in a state of consumption rather than production. If you spend your 1 hour on research that is actually just scrolling through Twitter or watching hustle culture, TikToks, you are a gambler in the casino. You are losing your most precious capital, your attention, to leverage the renaissance. You must use the tools as a builder, not a user. This means using social media to post, not to scroll. Using AI to generate, not to browse. Using YouTube to teach, not to binge. The story of the code wealth. The author shares the story of a librarian named Elena. Elena loved organization and systems. During her 1 hour, she taught herself basic no-code tool software that allows you to build apps without being a computer scientist. She spent 6 months building a simple digital template for small libraries to track their rare book collections. She didn't have a marketing budget or a sales team. She simply posted it on a few forums and on her digital twin blog. Because it was a digital asset, it cost her nothing to host. 5 years later, that one template provides her with a passive salary that matches her librarian income. She leveraged the digital renaissance to turn a niche interest into a global asset. She didn't work hard for 5 years. She worked strategically for 1 hour a day. The future of work. The sovereign individual. We are moving toward a world of sovereign individuals. In this future, the traditional 9-to-5 job will become increasingly rare. Companies will hire projects, not people. In this economy, your 1 hour is your survival insurance. If your only asset is your ability to show up to a specific building and follow orders, you are at the mercy of automation and outsourcing. But if you have spent years building a portfolio of assets, paper, digital, and human, you are the one in control. You can plug in to the global economy whenever you want and unplug when you don't. The digital renaissance has made freedom a choice rather than a luxury. Reflecting on the new rich aren't the people with the most money. They are the people with the most time leverage. They are the people who can take a month off without their income dropping by a single dollar. This level of freedom is only possible because they spent their 1 hour building in the digital realm. They realized that a line of code or a recorded video is a digital worker that never gets tired. They stopped trying to save their way to wealth and started building their way to wealth. But leverage is a multiplier, not a creator. If you multiply 0 by 1,000,000, you still have 0. To truly make the most of the digital renaissance, you need a long-term vision. You need to understand that the 1 hour isn't a get-rich-quick scheme, it's a get-rich-forever plan. In our final chapter, we look at the 10-year horizon and the ultimate goal, the exit. Key takeaway: the digital world is the first place in history where the small producer has the same weapons as a giant corporation. Your job is to stop being a user of the tools and start being a builder with them. Chapter 8. The long game, the 10-year horizon. If you have followed the journey this far, you are no longer the person who started this video. You have the blueprint of the 4 pillars. You understand the neurochemistry of the golden hour, and you've learned to navigate the digital renaissance. But there is one final, formidable enemy you must face. It is not a competitor, a market crash, or a lack of talent. It is the siren song of the short term. We live in a culture of now. We want the body in 6 weeks, the business in 6 months, and the retirement in 6 years. But true, generational wealth, the kind that builds assets forever, does not operate on the human calendar of impatience. It operates on the decade horizon. The core idea of this final chapter is the transition from the grind to the choice. It is about the math of freedom and the psychological endurance required to see the 1 hour habit through to its inevitable conclusion. The law of delayed gratification. There is a famous psychological study involving a marshmallow. A child is put in a room with a single marshmallow and told, "If you can wait 15 minutes without eating this, I will give you a second one." The children who could wait, who could prioritize the future self over the current self, went on to have significantly higher success in almost every area of life: SAT scores, health, and income. Wealth is essentially a giant marshmallow test. Every morning during your 1 hour, you are choosing to not eat the marshmallow. You are taking your best energy and investing it in a future you cannot yet see. The author argues that most people are temporal myopics. They can only see what is directly in front of them. They think a year is a long time. The wealthy, however, think in decades. They know that a year is just a single rotation of the snowball. The 3 phases of a decade. To survive the 10-year horizon, you have to know which phase you are in. If you expect phase 3 results while you are in phase 1, you will quit. Phase 1, the invisible build years 1 to 3. In this phase, you are the Pablo from our earlier parable, digging the trench. You are putting in 365 hours a year of deep work. To the outside world, nothing has changed. Your car is the same. Your job is the same, and your bank account is growing at a snail's pace. This is the filter phase. This is where 90% of your competition drops out. They see the lack of immediate status and decide it's not working. In phase 1, your only metric of success is consistency. Did you show up for the hour? If yes, you won. Phase 2, the inflection point, years 4 to 7. This is where the math of compounding begins to go vertical. Suddenly, the skills you've stacked and the assets you've built start to talk to each other. Your digital twin has enough authority to attract opportunities without you looking for them. Your paper assets are generating enough dividends to cover your basic bills like groceries or utilities. You start to feel the wind at your back. This is the most dangerous phase because you might be tempted to retire too early or increase your lifestyle spending, which kills the momentum of the snowball. Phase 3, the sovereign exit, years 8 to 10. By year 10, the 1-hour habit has produced a machine that is larger than you. The income from your assets, dividends, royalties, business systems now matches or exceeds your primary salary. This is the moment of total optionality. You don't have to work anymore. You can choose to keep your job because you love it, or you can walk away and spend your days traveling, creating, or being with family. You have achieved escape velocity. The math of the exit. How do you know when you've won? The author suggests the rule of 25. To be forever wealthy, you need an asset base that is 25 times your annual expenses. If you spend $50,000 a year, you need $1.25 million in productive assets. If you try to save $1.25 million from a linear salary, it might take you 40 years. But because your 1 hour creates exponential assets like a business or a digital product that can 10x in value overnight, the path to that number is much shorter. The 10-year horizon is not a guess. It is a statistically probable outcome for anyone who builds scalable assets for 60 minutes a day. The psychology of the finish line. There is a strange thing that happens when you reach the 10-year mark. Most people find that they don't actually want to stop working. Why? Because the 1-hour habit has turned them into a producer. They have spent a decade getting their dopamine from building rather than buying. The goal of the 1 hour wasn't just to get the money. It was to transform the person. You have become a high-value individual. Even if you lost everything on day 1 of year 11, you would be back to wealth within 24 months because you now possess the human capital of a millionaire. This is the true meaning of wealth forever. It's not about what's in your vault. It's about what's in your character. The legacy of the hour. As we reach the end of the book's journey, we have to look beyond our own bank accounts. The author reflects on the idea of intergenerational wealth. Most people leave their children money, which is often gone within 2 generations. But if you teach your children the habit of the hour, you have given them something far more durable. You have given them a life operating system. You have taught them that they are not victims of the economy, but creators of it. You have shown them that 60 minutes of discipline can buy a lifetime of freedom. This is the legacy of the hour. It is a philosophy of life that says, I will not be a passive passenger on this planet. I will be a builder. The cost of inaction, a final warning. The author ends the chapter with a sobering reflection. Time is going to pass anyway. 10 years from today, you will be 10 years older. The only question is, what will you own 10 years from now? If you continue to give 100% of your best time to others, you will be in the same position you are today, perhaps with a slightly better car and a lot more gray hair, but still a temporal debtor. You will still be one paycheck away from disaster. You will still be trading your finite life force for someone else's dream. The 1 hour habit is a bridge. On one side is the rat race, the world of buckets, linear income, and constant anxiety. On the other side is the orchard, the world of pipelines, exponential assets, and sovereign freedom. The bridge is long. It takes 10 years to cross. But the first step is only 60 minutes long. We have reached the end of the chapters. We have deconstructed the alchemy, the assets, the habits, and the leverage. Now, it is time to bring it all together. We need to distill this 2,000-page mental journey into a final, actionable philosophy for your life. Key takeaway. We overestimate what we can do in a year, but we drastically underestimate what we can do in a decade. The 1 hour is the only habit that can turn a laborer into a legend. We have traveled from the quiet, dark hours of the early morning to the sunlit horizon of a 10-year legacy. What we have uncovered is not a secret hack or a complex financial algorithm, but a fundamental truth about the human condition. Our lives are the sum of our small, repeated rituals. The deeper message of 1 hour a day to wealth is that true poverty is not a lack of money. It is a lack of agency over one's own time. When you sell every ounce of your creative energy to an employer and spend your remaining hours as a passive consumer of entertainment, you are living in a state of temporal slavery. The 1 hour habit is your act of emancipation. It is the moment you stop being a component in someone else's machine and start becoming the architect of your own. This book challenges the cultural narrative that says wealth is for the lucky, the ruthless, or the born rich. It argues that wealth is a scientific inevitability for anyone who can master the friction of the starting line and the silence of the boring middle. It shifts the definition of success from how much do you make to how much of your life do you actually own. As you move forward from this journey, keep these 5 practical principles as your compass. The sovereignty of the first hour. Never give your best energy to a task that doesn't build an asset you own. Pay yourself in time before you pay the world in labor. The producer's filter. In every situation, ask, am I consuming value here, or am I finding a way to produce it? Move from the audience to the stage. The geometry of leverage. Stop looking for more work. Look for more leverage. Build digital twins and wealth machines that can work at a scale your physical body never could. The discipline of the X. Forget the $5 million goal. Your only goal today is to put an X on the calendar. Win the hour, and the decade will take care of itself. The 25X exit. Know your number. Calculate the cost of your freedom and treat every 60-minute block as a brick in the wall of that fortress. We live in a world that is louder, faster, and more distracting than ever before. Trillion-dollar industries are betting that you will spend your next hour scrolling, watching, or dreaming without doing. They are betting on your impulsiveness. But now, you know the math. You know the alchemy. You know that 60 minutes is the minimum effective dose for a transformed life. So, as we close this masterclass, I leave you with one final, haunting question. If you don't start digging your pipeline today, how many more buckets are you prepared to carry? Your hour starts tomorrow. Use it wisely.